Jim Brundidge?
Good morning. I have some handouts.
You're going to give us a report on the Memorial Day weekend airport report.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Okay.
So this is a pretty comprehensive report. It's going to include operations on Memorial Day weekend, which we include from Thursday the 22nd through Monday the 26th. Those are the busiest days. And following that, it will be a report on the complaints, correlating the complaints to the operations. And third is a change to the one of the noise abatement routes called the Sierra route, meaning the southern route, which comes along the south shore of the island. We had to make a change for safety, and I want to brief that. And finally, there are two resolutions that will be under consideration for Thursday that I'd like to brief on. So I'll walk you through the handout for the public record. The airport has three sources of data collection to determine the number of aircraft operations: air scene, aircraft tracking, number one, cameras installed by Vector for billing, and manual logs filled out by airport personnel. Each of these methods has limitations. Air scene sometimes duplicates tracks and sometimes drops tracks due to various technical problems. Vector only records operations that the cameras pick up, which is most of the traffic, but some are missed. Manual logs are filled out when the office is staffed, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. during busy days. To get the most accurate count, all three sources are reviewed, which takes several hours. Having said that, here is our best estimate of operations over the Memorial Day weekend. Total operations from Thursday through Monday, 872. Helicopter operations were 40% of that, or 341. The percent of helicopters arriving over the November arrival route from roughly Jessup's Neck area to Long Pond to the power lines to the airport, 50%. The other half of the arrivals came down the Sierra route and up Georgica Pond. For departures, only 15% used the Echo route, which goes from the airport to Barcelona Neck and out over the water. And 85% used the Sierra route for departure.
Well, just show that on the map so
Yep,
people watching.
From the airport over Georgica Pond and then out the along the shore. Next page. Total number of complaints compared it to last year. 2013, we had 248 complaints for that time period, that Memorial Day weekend period. This year, we had 475. And the number of complaints by distinct households, in 2013, there were 39 distinct households that complained. In 2014, 83. Next page. Complaints from distinct households by route. The November route had 52% of the complaints. Echo route had 29% of the complaints. And interestingly enough, although Sierra route had most of the traffic, it only had 19% of the complaints. So complaints by hamlet. It's broken down by hamlet, but the total complaints in 2013 were 248, and in 2014, 475. Next page.
Well, Jim,
Well, let's have maybe questions first.
well, I think it's worthwhile to point out for this past weekend,
Yeah. No, this is the Memorial Day weekend.
for the for the Memorial Day weekend,
Right.
what the total were and what the percentages were of types of aircraft.
Oh, I think I have that.
40% with the helicopters.
Let's see. Did I break that down? Let me see.
Because the complaints by Hamlet Memorial Day through the total number of complaints was 475.
Right.
302 of which were helicopter
Right, yes,
complaints.
that's where it's broken down. 302 were, right. majority were for helicopters.
Which is
Exactly.
almost two-thirds.
Yep,
Well, two-thirds of the complaints were for helicopters.
right,
Of the 475, 302.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, another question, total operations from Thursday to Monday were 872,
Yes,
and there were 475 complaints. Is that 50% of the operations had complaints, noise complaints?
yep,
50%? Over 50%?
right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Let's move on to the Sierra route change. Sierra, meaning the southern route. Previously, and for use during the Memorial Day weekend, helicopters would come along the south route and at 3,000 feet, start descending over Georgica Pond and do a circling descending turn over the airport for landing. For departures, they would do a circling climb up to above 2,000 feet and continue to climb to 3,000 feet over Georgica Pond and out the route. After the experience of Memorial Day weekend, both Control Tower and Eastern Region Helicopter Council Representative Jeff Smith reported that the Sierra route procedures were not working, and that was based on feedback from his pilots. From the tower's perspective, having helicopters perform a circling descent for arrivals caused the tower to lose sight of helicopters and decrease the safety margins for proper aircraft separation. In a meeting at the airport on Friday, May 30th, in which Kathy attended, it was determined that the safest method of arriving and departing from the Sierra route was to, number one, have arrivals continue eastbound past Georgica Pond, come in at 3,000 feet, continue past Georgica Pond, and start descending to 2,000 feet in a base turn and fit into the left-hand traffic pattern as all other traffic does. And then for departures, climb straight out, runway heading to 1,500 feet, make a left turn, continue to climb to 2,000 feet to join the Sierra route to depart at 3,000 feet on the Sierra route. And you have a photo of that in your package. Kathy asked me to put a screenshot of the plane noise interactive screen that shows complaints by aircraft type and location. That's the third, the second graphic that you have.
What does that graphic represent again, Jim?
It's location of complaints by groups of households and the numbers, and the color coding is down on the bottom. It tells you what type, and this goes to what Councilwoman Overby mentioned, that helicopters, you can see, are the pink, most of the, or at least half the complaints, or a third of the complaints.
So the greatest number of complaints on this graphic are in the Barcelona area?
On this chart, it
Barcelona,
shows
Sag Harbor.
115 complaints.
Pretty much split
But
half
if you
and half
drill
between-
down into this graphic on an interactive screen, it tells you exactly how many households, and it may only be a few households, but it's a lot. Well, as a matter of fact, Peter can speak to this. There's one gentleman, we won't be named, but
Yeah, that's
he's in
not
that area.
Barcelona, it's eastern Sag Harbor Village has got the highest number. And there's a particular complainant that has a serious problem with aircraft noise of all types, and we get multiple calls from him every day.
Well, of the 115, how many were from the single household, do you know?
I don't remember specifically, but I would bet 80%, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Finally, there will be two resolutions that you'll be considering on Thursday's meeting. Kathy asked me to put together. One is, they're both budget issues. One is a proposal to increase landing fees by 10%, and the other is to propose an increase in fuel flowage fees to 30 cents a gallon from 15 cents a gallon. And these proposals were both made by the Budget and Finance Committee. And the language isn't, I don't have it exact. This is my language, and John Jelnicki, I think, is refining it. But it says, whereas the town airport is supported by leases and various fees, and whereas the town Budget and Finance Committee has recommended that landing fees be increased 10% in order to provide adequate revenue to maintain the airport, now therefore be it resolved that the attached landing fee schedule be approved for implementation into the adoption of this resolution. And that's your third handout, is the landing fees, the new fees. Any questions on that?
And that should be about $100,000 in revenue for this year,
The 10%
the
increase.
10% increase, because we're doing it in, it would be effective immediately. Last year, I believe landing fees were in the range of $1.3 million, is what the town collected in revenue. It's our biggest source of revenue for the town.
Second one is proposal to increase fuel flowage fees to 30 cents a gallon. Whereas the town operates an aviation fueling facility for the FBOs, and whereas the fee for operating the facility has not changed in over 20 years when the fuel prices were much lower, and whereas the town Budget and Finance Committee has recommended the fuel flowage fee be increased to 30 cents per gallon from the existing 15 cents per gallon, now therefore be it resolved that the fuel flowage fee charged to the FBOs be increased to 30 cents per gallon effective upon adoption of this resolution.
Right, we know that we were getting 15 cents a gallon in 2002 because the town had gotten a grant from the Department of Transportation and did a study, and it was told then that we should be starting to increase the fuel flowage fee, which recommendation was not followed. But back in 2002, the price of fuel, retail price of fuel, was about $2.50 per gallon. Now it's about $7 per gallon, and this was a recommendation by the BFAC, Airport Finance Subcommittee, that we increase it, and they did, they did their homework, and it's really what the going rate is among other airports, is 30 cents per gallon for fuel flowage fee.
Does it make sense to tie it to a percentage
Yeah.
rather
Well,
than
they
rather
actually-
than a price? Because
well,
as the price fluctuates.
They're exploring this. In fact, this is their recommendation as a stopgap for 2014, and that they, that it would be effective immediately. But they are looking at other ways to charge the
It seems if you
fee.
do it as a percentage, then it would automatically reset
Right.
itself, and that would be more advantageous to the revenue
Mm-hmm.
generation.
That's going to be a recommendation that comes from them,
Okay.
later. They
So this
discussed it
is
yesterday.
somewhat of a stopgap.
This is for now, because it's, it's inexpensive, to keep up with the fuel farm and, the amount of man hours that go into it. It's a revenue that we should be, it definitely needs to be increased.
And that's my report.
Questions of Jim? I have a couple, or at least one. Kathy, the one thing I did want to say is, and/or Jim, whoever's most appropriate, I do think we should meet with Deb and, Cindy, before Thursday, and if there are questions that she has, procedural questions or otherwise, we ought to try to work those out. Jim, on the issue of the southern route,
Yeah.
the one that you're proposing be changed,
Yep.
my question relates to the process there. How are we independently evaluating the issue of safety there, as opposed to any part of this that might be convenience for helicopter operators? I mean, what could you talk to how we professionally evaluate that route should somehow be changed? It was brought to your attention apparently by the Helicopter Association.
No, it was brought to my attention by the control tower.
Okay.
They were the ones that said, this is not working. We are losing sight of the helicopters in their spiraling turns. Some are spiraling down, some are spiraling up, and it's providing a potential for an unsafe situation. And we don't mind, this is their tower speaking, they didn't mind the climbing turn over the airfield for departure, but the arrival was providing a serious conflict with not only other helicopters, but fixed-wing traffic.
And they used line of sight, and what they were saying is that they would lose sight of the helicopter for 10 to 15 seconds. It would be over the roof, and they did not have kept the visual, and it was
Of course,
potential safety issue.
My comment was put a hole in the roof, but I don't want to be...
The glass ceiling at
my-
the airport?
Yeah. I mean, is this just literally a visibility issue at the tower, or?
It's both a visibility issue and I would say a procedural issue in terms of, how that procedure interacts with other traffic, both fixed wing and other helicopters.
So you have overlapping spirals,
Right.
both coming down and going up. and
Because we've
clearly
requested
might
that
be
they come
a
in at a higher altitude. It's because we've dictated a higher altitude. We've raised out, the waypoints 1,000 feet in some places. And so then they've got to come down on the north side of the airport, and that was, some were coming down right, some were coming down left, and that there was...
So it was creating a potential traffic conflict.
Exactly.
Not only among helicopters, but also with the fixed-wing aircraft, and creating potentially a dangerous situation.
We don't like to use the word dangerous, but it could be.
I said potentially. Yeah, I mean, the downside to this is my guess is more complaints.
Yeah.
I mean, truthfully.
Well, it's possible.
The southern route, yeah, I mean, I looked at the box that you sort of established as a way in and out, and I see houses. I don't see George Capon. Not that the people on George Capon won't be happy to get some relief if they do here, but we're basically bringing this traffic in and then out, in over, residential areas in Georgica and just west, just east of the airport now. And we're
Well, the
exiting.
one thing I would comment,
Let me,
sorry.
yeah. And then we're exiting, over, more residential homes on the west side of Wainscott.
That was,
Not
that
good.
was, that was considered, but it
Yeah.
was considered the best route for safety.
And this
I
was
would
the...
I would like to comment that in terms of complaints by district households, this area was the lowest.
That's what I was
in
going to
complaints.
exactly.
And when...
My expectation is that
will
that
increase.
could change, yeah.
Right, and I was at the meeting on Friday, I listened, it's not the town board's position to set routes, it's the airport manager working in conjunction with the air traffic control tower and getting advice from Eastern Region Helicopter Council, because their members are the one that's flying. But when you look at the first page, 50% of the arrivals were on Sierra, and 85% of the departures coming in on the same route.
Yeah.
We had saturated Sierra, so they felt that they needed to split up. They needed to have an arrival, separate arrival and separate departure route, because it was unsafe.
Look, you can't, it's very easy for me as a layperson and a board member to jump to conclusions here, okay? I mean, it's just, and it's always fraught with that. I think we all have our, immediate reaction to these kinds of things. But, look, based on the weekend, and I realize it's just a weekend, you've got an almost, doubling of the traffic over the weekend. Now, there may be multiple reasons for that. I'm sure there's weather and other things that are different from the prior year, but no matter how you look at it, you've got, substantially more traffic over this period of time.
Yeah.
To some extent, contributing to a conflict, right, with, air traffic routes. And, substantially more complaints, I mean, all of which arrive at a, tend to, as a layperson, lead me to a conclusion that, we need limits. I mean, we really need limits here.
So you are saying the traffic was 50% more this weekend in 2014 than 2013?
No, 20%.
20% more?
Yeah.
Do you anticipate that for the rest of the summer?
It's hard to
How do
tell
you-
because the weather during the Memorial Day, same period last year, during Memorial Day weekend was very bad. So I don't know. I'm only guessing that it was weather related. We have the same helicopters coming and going as we have for the past several years. We haven't increased that base of clientele.
All righty. Other questions from board members? Jim, thank you.
You bet.